Now let's try to figure out how we can basically paint our object inside Blender. So if you don't want to go into separate software, you can also do some texture painting in Blender. It can be pretty expensive, where you can do a bunch of pretty interesting things, but for the beginning I'm just going to show you generally how you can start working with texture painting. So first thing first is that we need a texture to work with. So right now, if I go to texture paint, I cannot do anything much because I don't have a texture. And we have the UVs in here where you can paint, and you can see that we're in the paint mode, we're not in the view mode, which is normally where you would be if you're looking at your UVs. And here we have the purple, which means basically we don't have a texture in here. So to create a texture, let's click Shift A and then search and type texture. And in here we have image texture. Of course, you can go in here and click on texture and find it. I usually like to work with shortcuts. Let's click a new one and let's name it texture painting. And here we have the resolution. Let's leave it as is. And let's leave the color at black. Actually, let's put it something more neutral, like gray. And let's collect it to base color. Now that we have this, let's go to our texture paint. And since we had the texture selected, it will automatically show it in here. Now if you start painting, we can see that we have our white being represented on this model. And we have white in here. So let's actually go through some properties that we have. So first thing is just a simple draw brush, where you can do a bunch of things in here. There is some options that we're gonna go over later. Then you have your soften, so if you have some rough edges, you can kind of soften it up. This can especially happen if you try to do something like this. When you are maybe even like this, where you have like a really sharp edge because the software did not know that you wanted to kind of paint in here. Then you could go in here and try to smooth it out. Maybe even increase the strength of the brush. Actually, strength is fine, maybe size. It's kind of hard in the edges to kind of smooth it out, but you kind of can do a bit of smoothing, as you can see with the edges. The next thing that we have is smear. So smear is basically where you take part and try to kind of smear it. Now, I'm not sure why it's not working. It should be basically kind of pulling and combining colors together, but for some reason it is not working right now. Let's go to another one, which is clone. And clone is basically when you want to select a part and then copy from it, like this. So I can select basically from where I want to copy it and then paint it out to any other part. You can hold Control to basically do this. And then we have our fill, which is basically we just click, and whatever color we had selected, it will just fill it up with that color. And we have a mask also if we want to. We need a stencil, but basically what we would do is basically mask out part of the mesh, and then we have no control over that part. Basically saying we don't want to paint on that. Most of the time you're going to go into the brush. Let's swap to black so we can see the difference. And in here, what you can do is click X to swap between foreground and background color, and you have your strength, radius, which are usually what you're going to use. You can also use some blending modes, so this might be useful if we, let's say, have blue in here, and we want to paint red over it. We can do multiple things, so we can do color burn, we get this effect. You can notice that this probably looks similar like something that you would do in Photoshop. So this is basically blending modes. How do you want to blend these two colors? So if we blend blue and red, we get purple, but if we blend red and white, we get white. White is lighter than red. We can do saturation. Let's see. Color, so we just want this color to be, since it is already red. Value. So red is not that dark, so it will give us this, but if we choose something like, I think maybe green, I think they are usually similar hue. So if I increase the darkness, only the darkness will pass through. So yeah, mix is the most general, where you can see how they try to mix. Now this is black because yeah, the color values intercept and they become darker. But you don't have to use mix. You can also use, let's say, overlay, where it doesn't work when we try directly on the blue, but in between we get some values. So yeah, the blending modes can be pretty useful. Usually you're going to do mix or maybe even add or something, where you just want to add whatever color you have. The next thing that we have is our brushes. You can have different settings for different brushes, so you can create multiple of them and then swap around, so you don't have every time. So you don't want every time to change stuff for each brush when you're swapping between them. So you can do that there. You have your color palette, so for some reason if you want to save your colors, I like this green, I like this red, I can just save them in here and quickly swap. Pretty useful if you're painting. For painting, this can be yeah, lifesaver, so you don't have to every time remember the hue value or something, your hex value. You can just yeah, save it in here. We also can affect alpha, so this is our fourth channel, so we have RGB. We can also affect the transparency that is usually stored inside alpha. Let's see, we have a texture. Again, we have a texture here, but you don't have to paint uniformly if you don't want. You can have like a texture, maybe dirt or something, or dust, and you can paint basically dust, dirt, something like that. Can get pretty useful if you have something like that. And in here you can also use colors to kind of paint literal textures onto your texture. But with texture mask, you can actually mask, so some parts will be transparent. So if you had the dust, it might look like little particles that are painted, and then everything else will not be painted around. So you use black and white values here, but with texture you can use actual, like a grass texture, and paint grass texture. Then we have a stroke, so similar when we were sculpting, so it just increases the distance between strokes. So now we have more distance. Normally is 10%, which is pretty nice. And you can stabilize it. This is that we went in some tutorials before with sculpting. You have your symmetry, so we can see if we start painting, it is symmetrical on the x-axis. But of course you can change it. We can do y, so that means that this should be symmetrical, and on z if we want, which would be in here. And of course you can combine multiple of them, so if for some reason I want both of them to be symmetrical, I can do that, and now we have symmetry on both sides. Or we would have symmetry like this, so it will paint in here and then in here. And that's kind of about it for the basic brush and painting. If you want to change what texture you're painting, you would go to shading, create a new image texture. So if I duplicate this, I'm just going to click X here, and we click new. I can click new, and let's put in base color so we can see it. Select it, and now we have this new texture, and we can also see it in here, so you can quickly swap between them. And we can use single image and create new image, or use whichever we had before, or we can use the material and then take any textures that we have in the currently selected material and then start painting over them basically. So I think that's kind of the basics of it. I don't think we have anything more to go over. You have the similar options in here if you don't want to bother with these options. And also keep in mind, when you are texture painting, you are painting as separate textures. So if I had this texture set to, let's say, roughness, actually metallic might be a better one. Let's do metallic, and then let's do base color for this. Let's see, why is it Anyways, let's go into the material. I'm not sure why this is black. Oh, I disconnected here. Okay. So if you go in here and then let's go here and select this guy. I'm gonna start painting with black. And we should see, or maybe white. Okay, we can kind of see. Okay, this view might be good. So we can see how we are going from metallic to non-metallic material because we have this shading set up in here. Let's also connect it to roughness so we can see it even better. Where when I swap around, we can see now it's highly metallic and highly kind of specular, rough. So when you're painting, you don't actually have to think it in a way of color. You can also think it in other ways where black and white means more or less metallic, more or less rough. So you can use the textures that are representing roughness, metallic, anything like that, and paint it out. So maybe some of parts of the objects you want to be more metallic. You can just use that specific texture and paint on that. But you have to keep in mind that after you paint your texture and save the texture, that it is replaced. So your old texture without your painting will not exist.